I wanted to quickly run through, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on these executive orders, Riccardo, and what the repercussions are for Australia. On day one, as I said, Joe Biden as president, he was trying to rush through 17 executive orders that he signed. I'm surprised he stayed awake for all of them. I'll be honest with you. It was a very long day. Honestly, Joe, I said it in Arabic, haram, poor thing. I feel sorry for you. The length of the day, I'm just surprised you made it through it. I honestly mean that.
And he signed them on a desk the same size as his reputation and ability. Have you seen the little desk? He's on the little desk.
Yeah, they always do it like that. So the first executive order that was sort of signed, I think this is chronological, but it doesn't matter. They were all in the same time. It was an executive order requiring that people wear masks and keep their distance from each other on federal property. Now, he broke that half a dozen times within the few hours preceding that. But there is no, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no definitive evidence that masks work or don't work. We actually just don't know. There's no consensus. It doesn't matter what people say.
And there's certainly no scientific evidence that it works.
Exactly. There's actually studies showing for and against, but it's just not conclusive. And that's a problem if you're going to mandate something like it's the truth and you're going to censor videos like ours, which we'll talk about later. Second executive order, the launch of 100 days masking challenge to encourage Americans to wear masks. Now notice that's 100 days masking challenge. The reason he said that is because it's unconstitutional to mandate it across all the states. The Supreme Court would strike it down. So it's a 100-day masking day challenge. So it's sort of like
why? So the question is, why would you have an order that says you must wear a mask, but we're also going to have a please wear a mask program?
Yeah.
Now there are implications for Australia here, but my take on this is quite simple. It's a measure of compliance, because that's one thing they need to know. Because when they know, like in Australia, when the nation is compliant, they can take the next bold step. If the nation is not compliant, they can't take the next bold step because the population's not ready for it. The implications for Australia are this. So that's that measure. How compliant are they? Yep. The same question here, because I received a phone call from a supporter. And let me just quickly dive into these two because they're both important. I'll come with the second one shortly. Anyway, this particular supporter, Anthony, rang me up and said, it works. And I said, what? He said, the mask. I went into this shop and I said, they challenged me and they said it's compulsory to wear a mask. And the signs actually say it on, I think it was Coles. Yeah. It's compulsory to wear a mask, and it's not. It's not compulsory. It's not a law, and we've spoken that it is actually not based in law. It's an illegitimate direction. Yeah. But he said he followed the instructions, which were, I have a medical exemption, and they said, "What exemption?" I don't have to tell you. That's an invasion of my medical privacy. They said, "Okay." Now I wouldn't ask anybody to do what I wouldn't do, because I did the same thing. And a big shout out to the people at Bunnings. Thank you so much. You were brilliant. We went in to get some paint and some light globes and a few things. I love my Bunnings time. It was one of the best shops on the planet. We were confronted halfway through our shop by one of the managers and said, "Excuse me, you have to wear a mask. Would you like one?" It was very courteous. "Would you like a mask?" I said, "No, we have medical exemption." And he said, "What exemption?" I said, "I can't tell you. That's an invasion of medical privacy." And he said, "No problem. Can I give you a sticker saying that you are exempt from wearing the mask?" And I proudly wore my exemption sticker as I went through Bunnings. Legendary. So there you go, folks. So it's a measure of compliance. Now, implications for Australia. I received another call this morning from another person almost in tears. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? We had a long chat about that for about 40 minutes. And the reason this individual was particularly worried is because she was travelling overseas some 10 years ago, went to the doctor just to get some vitamins, some stuff to make sure she handles the trip well. And the medical professional at the time said, you should get now which one was it? Swine flu. You should get the swine flu virus as a prophylactic, just in case you're exposed. Yeah. The vaccine, not the virus.
Yeah, sure.
The vaccine.
Don't get the virus
swine flu vaccine. Well, you get one of the same.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Fact check.
Fact check that. You should get the swine flu vaccine as a prophylactic measure to prevent anything if you're exposed. And so she did. Well, the tale of woe over 10 years: autoimmune disease, narcolepsy, chronic fatigue, inability, and I can't remember the term, executive, there's a problem learning new things, particularly sequential issues. She has difficulty learning for 10 years of misery. Now, she went to the doctors to check out, is it any one of a number of other possible causes, and they came back and said, no, it's the vaccine. Yeah. So she's in tears. She said, what do we do? And I said, first thing is stop wearing masks. And she said, how does that help? Because if Australians wake up and stop wearing the mask, that's a message to the cabal and the treasonous politicians that we're not buying their nonsense. So they'll have to slow down their push for the vaccine. But everyone's wearing the mask. Have you seen it? The take-up is nearly 100%. And this gives them confidence that they can now push the vaccine because people believe it. So if we start taking off our masks, claiming a legitimate medical exemption, and as I said, one of the exemptions is anxiety, and anxiety is when you are dealing, this is the definition, you're dealing with a problem over which you have no control. So who does that cover? Work it out. Once we start taking off the masks, this has been one of those tangible steps to slow the vaccine issue out. And after that, we can start turning up in our millions and telling the politicians we're not buying this stuff anymore. So this is why you look at what they're doing and reverse it. Does that make sense? Absolutely, if you want to know what policies we should proceed with and in what sequence in terms of priority, have a look at what the other side is doing and reverse it. And if one of his first ones, one of the first 17, is compelling people to wear masks, our policy is get the masks off. Yeah. Correct.
Two of them actually.
Two of them.
So the next one is actually the reversal of Trump's decision to remove the US from the World Health Organization.
Well, this same woman, let me just continue.
Go for it.
When she went to the doctor and said, look, I'm traveling overseas, the doctor said, well, the World Health Organization recommends swine flu. No. So there you go. Now, just as a reminder for those who are late to the game, and no criticism, Dr. Tedros, head of the World Health Organization, was the number 3 man in a communist terrorist government running Ethiopia. He was responsible for a cholera outbreak covering up a cholera outbreak in Egypt. And this is the man that we trust. And even our foreign minister went to the trouble of defending the organisation by saying, oh, well, there might be some problems in the leadership, but by and large, they're telling us good things.
Oh, boy.
Moving right along.
Do not trust the WHO. You can trust them when they say things you like. For example, when they first came out and said lockdowns are good, now they're saying they're bad, it should be a last resort. I trust them. I trust them on that. Okay.
Well, if they're for the WHO, we're against it. Moving right along.
An executive order that creates the position of COVID-19 response coordinator and restores the Directorate for Global Health Security and Biodefense, a team in charge of pandemic response with the National Security Council. That's not much. Mike Pence was in charge of a similar thing before. It's just basically the COVID-19 task force. Nothing to see there. Calls to Congress to extend COVID-19 aid and requests to various departments to extend eviction and foreclosure moratoriums and pause payments for federal loans. So that's basically expansion of the debt, national debt. They want, I think it's $1,400 to go out to all Americans again, payments. And it's basically making sure people don't get kicked out. So, and this is the funny thing. They created the problem with the lockdowns, and then they're selling you the solution, and they're keeping the profits. This is what we're seeing, guys, and it's in real time. But I think that one's self-explanatory. This is one I want to get your word on. An instrument that will allow the US to rejoin the Paris Agreement on climate change within 30 days. Now, why would they do that, Riccardo, when China and India don't have to do anything till 2030, and they're the biggest emitters?
Again, I think we've covered it before, but it's a means by which they get money out of the average American and into other people's pockets. So they make money, but they also strip the average American citizen of their financial power, which they must do. And once again, if Biden's for it, any sensible person's got to be against it. And this tells you again the priorities. This is very bad news for the US.
Another one is an executive order reversing actions Trump took that Biden's agencies judged to have been harmful to the environment, public health, or the national interest, and asking agencies to revise these standards to tackle climate change. I think Trump did I think in his first 500 days, he ended up, for every one piece of legislation he put down, he repealed 23 of them. So he did a lot of deregulation, especially with climate stuff. So he got things through, which was good. I don't think this is great, but I won't elaborate on it too much. But deregulation has been largely really good for America. An executive order with the aim of embedding equity across federal policymaking and rooting out systemic racism and other barriers to opportunity from federal programs and institutions. This order will also disband the Trump administration's 1776 Commission, which is promoting American ideals in America's schools. What do you reckon about that one, Riccardo?
Internationalism. Internationalism. They're trying to solve problems that don't exist. There is no institutionalized racism. There might be personal racism, and that's a problem, excuse me, that must be dealt with progressively in terms of what you call de-radicalization or just information. Yeah. But there are enough black people out there, big names and small names, saying this is nonsense. There is no institutionalized racism. There are individuals, but there is none.
That's right. Larry Elder, guys, check his conversation out with Dave Rubin. He smashes him when Dave was a progressive. But,
and so once again, if there's no problem and they're bringing a solution to it, there's another agenda, and the agenda is to undermine American values, what made America great. And once again, you've got to understand, why is everyone trying to get to the US? They're not they're not beating a path to get to Pakistan. Yeah. They're not beating a path to Bangladesh. Yeah. Okay, so there's a reason, because the foundational elements of the United States as a nation are so attractive and so powerful and so wealth creating and so free that they need to rip that apart to destroy the country. And that's what this is all about.
Interesting. The next one's an executive order reversing a Trump administration order that excluded undocumented immigrants from the census. Interesting. Very interesting. So they're trying to include undocumented immigrants into the census now, which will... Do you know what that'll do? That'll end up, for example, adding more Congress seats to certain states because the population goes up. Whereas if you take the census data before, and this just occurred to me, it would be less. For example, in California, so many people are moving out of California that they're going to lose 2 seats due to redistricting.
Where are they going?
Well, Texas is getting one. There you go. And this is the funny thing, guys. In most of these states, the Republicans are going to win they've got control over redistricting, which means that in 2022, in the midterm elections, we're going to see probably a red wave, even if Trump doesn't intervene at all, because their incredibly vulnerable seats are up for grabs. But that's just a little tidbit for you. The next is a memorandum directing officials to preserve and fortify the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. I think that's something to do with immigration and kids coming from the southern border. Do you know anything else about that?
Oh, yeah. See, they were using the DACA program, which, again, they always give a program a name that sounds like it's a laudable objective, but the reality was it was being used by child traffickers to grab kids and walk across the border. So if this old man wanders across the border with a child, I'm his dad, I'm his dad. And they actually started doing... the DNA tests. Oh. Have we covered this before?
Not really, no.
Again, just in case we haven't, or for those that are new to the program, what Trump introduced, and it came up through a piece of advice from somebody. Let's just leave it at that. And what they started doing, they started DNA testing, and they could get a turnaround within a few hours. And so child and man would come across, and they'd do a quick DNA test. No connection. And what he cut down on wasn't looking after the children and locking them up, because that's what Barack Obama and Joe Biden did as president and vice president. They were locking up kids, but they wanted the program in order to allow child trafficking to occur on a major scale. And I apologize, I can't remember the actual numbers, but the number of kids that were saved from being sex trafficked was huge, because they did a simple DNA test, result in a few hours on the ground. The old man went straight into jail. You're a sex trafficker. That's exactly what it was. And the kids could be looked after properly, rather than just funneling them through, waving them through. Yeah. And then the next thing, the old man gets and sometimes it's women, and sometimes it's families. So this isn't a male thing. They used anybody to get the kids in. But if there wasn't a DNA connection, they locked up the adults and the kids get looked after, as opposed to under Biden when he was vice president, the child sex trafficking was huge. And so people are aware, sex trafficking is projected to overtake drugs and guns as the most profitable. Think about this for a bit. Most profitable earner for organised crime. And that's why Barry Soetto and his husband Michael were so keen on this whole thing.
Oh, that's shocking. That's actually shocking.
So this is, you really got to dive into this, guys.
Yeah, it's a big topic, and Trump did a phenomenal job with everything he did with that, like that and the wall. In fact, if for those of you who don't know, the reason why they take kids is not just for the trafficking trade, but it's also to get themselves in, because it's like a passport in a way. Because if it's just, a group of 50 men coming, then they're not going to let them in. It's going to be like 50 Syrian men rocking up to the UK. They're going to be like, no, you're not coming in. But if you've got kids with you, it complicates things. Kids
and the Middle Eastern example, it wasn't unusual for the men to dress up in a full burqa.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. It was just exactly what they used to do.
Wow. And
then they'd either kill the kids or sell the kids. They didn't matter. They just wanted to get across, and that's the way they did it.
Interesting. The next executive order is an executive action repealing 2 proclamations informally known as the Muslim ban that restricted entry into the US from major Muslim countries. Now, I'm so glad they brought this up, because the Muslim ban was actually, it stole some of the hard work from the Obama administration. The Obama administration came up with a list of like 19 or so Muslim countries that they deemed a threat, and probably action should be taken on to combat Islamic terrorism, radical Islamic terrorism. Well, Trump just grabbed the list and he said, okay, well, I'm going to keep progressing with this. And then they all, light their hair on fire and run around. It's like, what happened? This is Obama's work. I thought it was his economy, wasn't it? Well, this, just like if it was Obama's economy, this is also his hard work. Trump just followed through with it. Now, Trump did later on reverse his stance on the Muslim ban, but that's beside the point. Did you want to say anything on this? Or?
Oh, no. As you say, this is, again, the point here isn't necessarily the policy in and of itself. It's the fact that sociopaths will do something, and when you do it, they accuse you of doing wrong, and when they do it, it's okay. And you've just got to constantly pay attention, because the lies come. There's a line out of Apocalypse Now. The bull dust, inverted commas, piled up so fast you needed wings to stay above it. And that's why people get confused. Oh, no, this is black. Oh, no, this is white. Oh, no, this is black. Oh, no, this is white. Yeah. And eventually just shake their head and they go back to watching My Kitchen Rules.
Yeah, that's why I get paid for what I do, guys. It's not fun to go through the bull dust. Another one we won't go into depth on is an executive order revoking Trump's harsh and extreme immigration enforcement and directing agencies to set immigration policies more in line with the Obama administration's values and priorities. I wonder what values and priorities those would be.
Oh, child sex trafficking, drugs, guns, destroying the United States from within, allowing illegal immigration to destroy the economy. There's any number of values that the Biden administration is carrying on with. And
priorities being globalism. A proclamation that will pause the construction of the border wall with Mexico and determine how to best divert those funds elsewhere. I know. Well, because walls don't work, Riccardo. They don't work.
Once again, look, just look at what he's doing, and you now know why he's doing it. They're going to destroy the US.
A memorandum extend a designation allowing... Sorry, I'm going to say this again.
Liberians.
A memorandum extended... let me say this again. This is all going to get cut. A memorandum to extend a designation allowing Liberians who have been to the US for a long time to stay. Okay, that just seems like another...
Sideline on Liberia. It's named Liberia for liberty. Its capital is Monrovia. US President Monroe, when a lot of the free slaves were freed, helped them repatriate to Africa, and this country called Liberia was created in Monrovia after the US president was named the capital. It is a hellhole by any description. It is awful. It is absolutely awful. And I find it fascinating that if they've been here a long time, this doesn't say anything about whether they've had a clean record. It doesn't say whether they've contributed meaningfully to the growing of the economy or anything like that. No, if you've been here a long time, you can stay. That's one country you don't want people from. And there's any number of countries that are just appalling. So this is just ridiculous nonsense.
Interesting. The next one's very interesting. An executive order directing the government to interpret the Civil Rights Act as prohibiting workplace discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, not just race, colour, religion, sex, and national origin. For those of you that don't know, in California, they actually repealed the American Civil Rights Act so that they could discriminate based on all of those areas because they need to achieve true equity. amongst people, so that everyone's the equal sharing of nothing, basically. But we won't go any. We've all talked about that to death.
Okay.
Go for it.
Gender and identity. Okay, so you get, and this is a real example. There's a 56-year-old man, father of about 6 or 7 kids, decided he was a 6-year-old girl. Now, if somebody wants to wear a dress and pretend he's a 6-year-old girl, that's fine. But the rest of us shouldn't have to put up with it. Now, imagine that guy. What this law says is that guy wants to go to the little girl's change room at the local pool. You can't discriminate against him. How you feeling, Mum and Dad? You're nice and comfortable with that? Because that's what that means.
Interesting. The next one's an executive order enacting new ethics rules to government officials. Okay. I don't. Is that rules for thee but not for me? Is that
Oh man,
that's a great as a quote. An executive order reversing regulatory process executive orders enacted by the Trump administration. I think that just sounds like they're cutting his regulation cutting stuff, basically.
it does.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's actually the top 17.
Well, he can be assassinated now, and Kamala can replace him because most of the hard work's done.
Exactly. Oh boy. So Dan Crenshaw was sort of dissecting some of these things. He said, "Who's this agenda helping? The Paris Agreement? Did we talk about the Paris Agreement? Oh no, we did
Briefly, yeah.
Yeah, Paris Agreement. The China and European diplomats. It helps them. The Keystone Pipe." They're going to cancel the Keystone Pipeline. That's going to help the Russian oligarchs. They're stopping the wall, which is helping illegal immigrants. All of this screws over the working class. American priorities, small business, reopening and recovering, nowhere to be found. That is the situation we find ourselves in. The key